being recorded.
Oh, my voice is excellent. I have no problems with my voice, but the rest of me is collapsing. Are you doing it already? Mine don't mean anything at all. I'm so glad to hear that.
No, I think we're picking this up. It may be a little bit dark, but it is running.
You'll have to improve whatever you're doing because the subject matter needs improvement too. And was there something special you wanted me to tell you? Because actually all that's on my mind right now is a fashion show in the striptease.
It's coming in white.
58.
What did you do?
This recording is being made on July 5th, 1986 in Hendersonville, North Carolina at the Retirees Family Homestead. We're talking to Grandpa Herman, Carlton Martin, born January 22nd, 1909, and Grandma Herman, Estelle Nadler Herman, born March 13th, 1915. With us on the porch are Sandra Herman, wife of Roger, and Jennifer Herman, granddaughter to Grandma and Grandpa Herman. The purpose of this tape is to record for the descendants, for posterity, the experiences and background and all that sort of exciting stuff about Grandma and Grandpa, Carlton and Estelle, and where they came from and who they are and so forth. We'd like to know first from each of you something about your ancestors from the old countries, where they came from and when they came to America, how they came here, and what you remember or what you were told about your ancestors. Who'd like to start?
I'm feeble-minded and I can't remember much.
You weren't there.
All I know is that my mother was perhaps under 5 when she was brought here by her family from some part in Russia. We didn't speak Yiddish at home. My mother went to American schools. As a matter of fact, she was extraordinarily well gifted in the manner that she spoke. And at the time that I was growing up, that kind of speaking was called elocution. And she taught my sister Shirley and myself how to elocute. And we were asked many times to perform at different organizations because of the way we spoke and the way we had been taught. Over to you, Papa.
My father came from a ghetto in Chernovitz, which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was 14 when he arrived at Ellis Island with his parents. My mother came from Romania, where her father was a tailor in the Romanian court. She was 11 when they came to this country, and they came to Philadelphia, so she didn't see the Statue of Liberty when she landed.
Mom, what do you know about your father when he came over, or when his ancestors came over?
They came from Romania, and my father too must have been quite young when he got here. Again, I never heard either my mother or my father talk Yiddish at home. My grandfather lived with us for a while, my mother's father, who was a very gifted individual. I understand he played the guitar and he taught the Torah to Talmudic students. I know very little about my father's background, but I do remember that my mother was asked to make mamaliga a few times, and that's a corn pudding. Here in the States they call it Indian pudding, but in Romania it was mamaliga, and it was one of the things I could well do without, and still can do without.
You're making a mistake. It's a very good dish.
What do you remember about your growing up? Dad, you grew up in Mamaroneck, New York, is that correct?
That's right.
What do you remember about growing up and about Mamaroneck and your family, your brother and sister, your parents?
We lived on Arlington Street in a section called Harbor Heights, which was about 2 miles from Long Island Sound, and from the attic windows we could see the sound. We moved once while we were on that street to another house, which was number 10 Arlington Street, and we lived there until I went to college. Although when they rezoned the town, number 10 became 1223 Arlington Street, so that I moved without moving at all. I went through Mamaroneck Elementary School and high school. I used to like to travel even then. They had a job keeping me at home. I'd like to wander around the neighborhood and even further afield. One time it's recalled that I wandered all the way to White Plains, which was 7 miles away. I remember taking violin lessons and not having much interest in it. When I was in the middle of my sophomore year in high school, I decided I wanted to be a figure skater because I wasn't big and strong enough to play on the hockey team. So I got myself a pair of figure skates and found a teacher and was really learning well. And in the middle of January, just after my birthday, my instructor was showing off how he could jump over 6 barrels all at once, and I decided to try it. I didn't make it. In the middle of my sophomore year, I came down with osteomyelitis and spent most of the next 2 years in the hospital, having that taken care of. And fortunate that I always had the use of my arm after that. They wanted me to learn to eat with my left hand, and I said, no, I'm going to get better, and I learned to eat with my right hand, not my left, and I've eaten with my right hand ever since.
Was the osteomyelitis related to the skating accident?
Well, I was knocked out in football, in tobogganing, fell off an automobile while I was going, ran into a tree skiing, and was knocked out a couple of times in hockey, so they probably all contributed.
Who's throwing balloons over here?
Can I go get my balloon?
Now, when the osteomyelitis hit, how did it affect you, and why did you end up in the hospital, and who took care of you? How did all that come together? How did you end up finishing high school, and how did you finish up high school with all that hospitalization?
I was home most of the time, my sophomore, junior, and senior years. That was the last half of my sophomore year. I did a tremendous amount of reading and thinking. And since I had plenty of time to get the problems done in math, I'd get them done whereas the kids playing football and doing all the other things that kids that age didn't have the time to put in. I got through high school, but with some delinquencies, and then spent a half a year in the prep school in New York to bring up those delinquencies. Spent my freshman year at Alfred University, and my physical condition was back to such that I went out for the cross-country team. After a year at Alfred, I found out from the dean of men that they didn't have the biology course that I wanted, and he recommended that I transfer to the University of Michigan in St. I got through the University of Michigan, and I decided along the way that I wanted to study the geography of disease. And I've been fortunate enough to have much contact with Frank Chapman, who was head of ornithology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and with some of the professors at the University of Michigan that led me into studying diseases of wild birds. But along the way, in talking with a lot of people, particularly in the medical profession, my folks felt that I should study medicine as a background, and then if I didn't do well in research, I could always hang out a shingle. That sort of rubbed me the wrong way, and though I was enrolled as a pre-medical student all the way through college, and 1 year after that when I went to the University of Vienna, when I came back from Vienna, I decided I would go on for a doctorate in biology, which I did. I spent 2 years at Syracuse University and 3 years at Hopkins.
So you were initially thinking about becoming an MD?
No, I wasn't. My parents thought this was the direction I should go for the things I wanted to do.
All right, so when you were in high school, your mother spent quite a bit of time taking care of you, didn't she?
Very much so.
You developed quite a relationship with your mother at that stage?
Very much so. She was a wonderful gal. She used to take kids from an orphanage out for a ride every once a week. She'd collect flowers from our garden and from all the neighborhoods and bring them down to the hospital where I was and to various other hospitals along the way. She did many things of that sort.
Because of that close relationship and respect you had for your mother, we hear a lot about your mom and in family discussions, but we really don't hear that much about your father. Could you share a little bit with us about your recollections of your father, what he did for a living, and his relationship with the family and the community and profession and so forth?
Well, when my father finished high school, he went on and became a certified public accountant and got a job with a big bottling works that was primarily selling spring water. At the time that the prohibition activities were developing, he and several other members of the firm tried to convince the top executives that they should go into the soft drink business, and they had a lot of conflicts with the factions and the outfits, which ended up in my father's being fired or resigning or something. He ultimately went with his older brother in the construction business. Finally, years later, went into the construction business for himself.
About how old was he when he made that career shift?
I don't know. I think it when I was about 8 or 10 years old, somewhere along there.
Uh-huh.
I never told. Let's see, we could trace it down. I just told you during the war, about 19, wasn't it? So I would have been 10 years old.
Uh-huh. Do you remember your father spending a great deal of time at home, or did he? What kind of relationship did he have with your family?
I remember him working in the garden and building a grape arbor that was like a gazebo that had a picnic table in the middle of it. I remember him making ice cream because I used to be the one that sat on the mixer and ultimately got the reward of licking the paddles. I remember going on hikes through the woods into various farm areas, picking apples and getting corn from farmers and things of that sort. What else?
So you spent a lot of time with your father as well as your mother then?
Oh, nowhere near as much time with my father as with my mother because he was working. In the later years when I was growing up, he was developing a building development in Lake Mohegan, New York, which meant that he left home about 5:30, 6 o'clock every morning and drove there, and then after the day's work drove back, and it was about 2 hours drive, so that took up a lot of his time.
Uh-huh. What do you remember about your brother Herbert and your sister Helen in your growing up years? Anything in particular stand out? Any anecdotes or memories you'd like to share?
Well, Herbert was 5 years older than I, and naturally his social friends were a little ahead of me. And my parents felt that when he was going someplace we could take his little brother along, which of course, understandably, he resented and would try and get out of it at every opportunity. He did very well scholastically and athletically in high school. Made the basketball team and the football team, and then went to Columbia University. We were very friendly in a sort of a way as an older brother, younger kid brother relationship, but other than that we had very little social activities together. I was much closer in age to my sister, and during the years that we were in college, she was at Syracuse and I was in Michigan. We carried on quite a correspondence, and were probably closer to each other at that time than at any other time in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mom, does Dad's recollection bring some memories back for you? I noticed several times when he was sharing some memories that you had a big grin on your face, the kind of grin that comes when you start remembering something yourself.
Actually, the grin has another origin. I was just thinking how wonderful it was to have all of you here, but it never occurred to me that you'd be bringing this little machine with you, and yet I think it's a good idea. Except, you see, I haven't had my hair done in a very sophisticated fashion, and I'm not wearing the proper clothes for viewing, so you're just going to have to listen to me.
Okay, we'd like to.
What would you like to hear?
What do you remember about your growing up years? You lived in one of the boroughs of New York.
I spent most of my free time, practically all of my holidays, up in Portchester with my mother's family, where I was exposed to merchandising and to the legal mines, because I had a cousin, and he had several cousins who were not directly related to me, but they were all going to law school. At the time, I was probably in my 11th grade in high school, so law became very appealing to me. And during my summer vacations, when I wasn't up in Portchester, I worked for lawyers. And when I took my law regents, I came out with a 94. And when I took my English regents, I came out with a 98. So it was a question of which way I would go. And my first job, 6 weeks after graduation in 1932, which was sheer good fortune. No one else in my class, I don't think, had a job as quickly as that. Was with a lawyer. And subsequently, Shirley even worked for him for a short while.
For the same lawyer?
Pardon me?
For the same lawyer?
The same lawyer for a short period. He was very new, and he was very tolerant. As a matter of fact, he was also very hospitable. I was invited to his home in New Jersey, in East Orange, New Jersey, and his mother was very gracious. He was the son of a recently deceased executive of the USLTA, that's the United States Lawn Tennis Association. So that he himself was an excellent player. And I have to let you know that I played tennis at that time. And his mother was very cooperative in that he had very little money to establish himself, and of course very few clients. But she knew that he had to have a secretary. So in order to keep me busy, she gave me her old opera programs that I had to convert to a type of album for her. And you'd be surprised how much I learned about the opera doing that. I also have to tell you that I was never a very good typist, and wills at that time had to be error-proof. I used to spend a good deal of time on Nassau Street buying more reams of legal paper. I made so many errors. I only worked for him for about 8 or 9 months, and then he had the opportunity of buying out another legal practice, which included the secretary. So that put me out looking for a job, and I just decided to look for a job in the area in which most of my friends were working, which was 42nd Street, rather than down on Broadway, down on 120 Broadway, which was near Wall Street. And the only store open at that time was Ovington's. And I still remember, pardon me?
At that time of day.
At that time of day. And I still remember the little Negro, we now call him a black man, who ran the elevator, and I asked him if there were any openings, and he took me upstairs to the advertising department, and I got the job and stayed there 7 years and loved every minute of it. I'm not so sure there are other people who can't wait until Monday comes after working until 5 o'clock on Saturday night.
You spent a lot of time in Portchester, but your family lived where, in the Bronx?
In the Bronx.
Now, how did you get from Portchester to the Bronx and Portchester and back?
I guess we went down to 125th Street and took the train up.
Some of the time you went on the New York, Westchester border.
I really don't remember. All I know is that that's where I spent my time, and for some reason I was the favorite granddaughter, no, not granddaughter, niece.
How long a ride was it? How long a trip was it from your family's home in the Bronx up to Portchester?
45 to 45 minutes.
About 45
I can't
minutes?
tell you exactly, because I'm sure I must have had some connections I had to make,
Mm-hmm.
because I went on the New York, New Haven, Hartford Railroad, did I know?
Part of the time, and part of the time on the New York, Westchester border.
Yeah, but my uncle, who was a very fine man and who really encouraged our courtship and encouraged our marriage, had a credit clothing business that he had had for many years in a prominent place in Portchester. He was to use the cliche, a pillar of the community, and he liked me. So that whenever I went up, I came home with a gift. Whenever they needed a little help in the store, he asked me to help, and I did that.
And this was all in Portchester?
I'm sorry,
This was all in Portchester?
I'm in Portchester.
All right. What was your life like in the Bronx? When did your family move to the Bronx? Were you born there?
I came up from lower New York when I was less than 6 months old, and I was the oldest child. So both Leonard and Shirley were born in the Bronx.
All right. You were born in New York City, in Manhattan?
In the Bronx, which is a
We
borough
were
of New York
not
City.
born in the Bronx, we were born on the east side.
Ah, 3 months, okay, 4 months.
All right. And Dad, you were born in Mamaroneck?
No, I was born in the Bronx. Lived there the first 2 years or 2 months of my life. I didn't like it, so we moved to the country.
Oh, okay. You were in control then?
Yes, sir.
I think you should know a series of coincidences that are worth mentioning. Daddy and I were destined for each other. He was born at 1498 Potomac Park East, and years later I had a very good friend there and used to spend a great deal of time visiting in that apartment house. More than that, years later my family moved to a 2-family house in the Bronx, and the owner, who lived downstairs, were friends of Daddy's family. And there was a third situation.
And I used to date their daughter.
Well, we don't have to talk about that. But there was a third coincidence. I think we were destined for each other. Let's put it that way.
So you moved to the Bronx, to the home where your parents lived, when you were very small. What recollection?
5 years young, not small.
Okay. when you were younger.
Much younger.
What recollections do you have of growing up with your brother Leonard and your sister Shirley?
I don't know. I was almost 3 years older than Shirley, and we went our different ways almost right from the start. I have to tell you that I was a, a developing musician. When I was 6 years old, I remember standing on a chair in the kitchen while my mother gave me my first violin. She played. My father played the piano. And this was my first attempt at being a virtuoso. And it never went beyond that. I carried my violin to school up until the 6th grade. I don't know what I did, but I remember carrying it. I also took lessons. I remember turning the clock frequently. I remember saying that I needed a pair of glasses because I couldn't see. I did not like to practice. I had no talent, but somebody was very persuasive, and I think when the lessons got more expensive, maybe that's when I got my freedom.
So you played violin as a child as Dad did, but neither of you continued with it.
Well, when I got my osteo in my arm, I couldn't move my arm anymore for about 4 or 5 years. And after that, not sufficiently to play. And I didn't get an interest in playing the violin until the week or two before I got the disease in my shoulder.
I remember growing up in University Park that you had a violin then.
Yes, I had the violin all the way through until Chick got to teaching in New Bedford. I gave the violin to him. I think he still has it.
Mm-hmm. Well, continue, Mom, with your talk about Shirley and Leonard in your growing up years.
Oh, I can't really remember. I don't know that I did very much with Shirley. And probably less with Leonard. Oh, I remember, I know, when I was in elementary school, it was a practice of all the little Jewish boys and girls to take the holidays off. And we'd get dressed up in our finery and return to school to talk to the teacher. This is what we did. And I remember taking Leonard to school with me frequently on those special holidays. He was a beautiful little boy. He had the most gorgeous blue eyes and long eyelashes. He's changed a little since then. As a matter of fact, he had a birthday yesterday. He was 64. But I seem to have grown much quicker and in different directions. However, both of them have achieved their levels of excellence in what they've chosen to do.
You've said something about your mother, but not very much. Could you share some more with us about your mother and what she did all day and what your relationship was with her?
All I can tell you is that I regret never really having shown you children what my mother looked like, and I do have a picture that was taken as a wedding gift to me just before I left New York in 1940, and I will uncover it so that all of you can see what your grandmother looked like. She was a housewife, and I swear once I started going to school and then working and then dating, I don't remember a great deal about communication. I know I used to call her from the office from time to time to find out how she was because she became ill or she was ailing for some years and never told us. We never really knew what bothered her. I never remember seeing bottles of medicine around that she would have been required to take. We were on very short rations, and she probably denied herself the medication that would have helped her. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that's true.
I have one side light on that. When we got married, the day we got married, I took Mother shopping, and one of the things I wanted to buy was the spices, and salt and pepper she agreed to. The rest of it she says, no, we don't need any of that. About 6 months later, she went to visit her mother at back in New York and was so surprised to find that the kitchen cabinet had all sorts of spices in it.
I never knew she used cinnamon, let alone anything beyond salt and pepper.
So you had the impression of things being very frugal in your home.
We were very poor, let's put it that way.
Okay. Why were you so poor? What did your father do or not do? What was your father doing all this time? You've talked a lot about your mother, but not too much about your father. Could you share some things?
Was an independent operator. He was a cutter in the garment industry, which at that time was considered a very skilled job. But early on, I would guess when I was perhaps 5 or 6, he left. He wanted to work outside, and he established a pinball company of his own. And he had the mechanics, the mechanical knowledge to set the machines up and to service them when they were not working properly. And he made a livelihood that way. And I would go out with him on Saturday mornings when we would empty the machines, and Saturday night we would count pennies. And I still remember the little container.